Dungeons & Dragons and the Great Satanic Panic. The 1980s saw the rise of mass hysteria over supposed satanic cults and satanic rituals, based on little to no credible evidence. This period of time, known as the Satanic Panic, extended to Dungeons & Dragons, D&D, and had a significant impact on gamers during this time. This video will look at the phenomenon of the Satanic Panic that arose in relation to D&D, its effects and the current state of gaming. D&D was created in 1974 and developed by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. It is a fantasy role-playing game which involves the use of dice and books containing rules, characters and stories. By the late 1970s, it became a popular game among teenagers and college students, particularly with those who enjoyed science fiction and fantasy genres. During the Satanic Panic of the 1980s, Dungeons & Dragons, D&D, was often portrayed in a negative light by the media and some religious groups, who claimed that the game was linked to Satanism and other forms of occult activity. These claims were often based on misinformation and a lack of understanding of the game, and were used to fuel fear and paranoia about the role-playing game and its players. Many media outlets ran sensationalized stories about the supposed dangers of D&D, often depicting it as a tool used by satanic cults to recruit and brainwash new members. Some religious groups also spoke out against the game, claiming that it was evil and corrupting the minds of young people. Despite the lack of evidence to support these claims, the negative portrayal of D&D in the media and by some religious groups contributed to the Satanic Panic and the fear and paranoia that it generated. This had a negative impact on the role-playing game industry and its players, who were unfairly targeted and ostracized as a result of the panic. Mazes and Monsters was a made-for-TV movie that aired on CBS in 1982. It was based on a novel of the same name by Rona Jaffe and starred Tom Hanks as a college student named Robbie Wheeling who becomes obsessed with a role-playing game called Mazes and Monsters. The movie was loosely based on a real news event from Michigan State University. James Dallas Egbert III was a student who disappeared there in August 1979. His vanishing was widely reported in the press, and his participation in the Dungeons & Dragons game was seized upon by the press and investigators as a possible contributing factor. This led to nationwide attention for the previously obscure game. The movie was produced during the height of the Satanic Panic. Mazes and Monsters was intended to be a cautionary tale about the dangers of role-playing games, and it portrayed the game as dangerous. However, the movie was criticized for its lack of accuracy and for relying on misinformation and stereotypes about role-playing games and their players. Later, the CBS News magazine 60 Minutes aired a segment on Dungeons & Dragons, D&D, that contributed to the Satanic Panic that was taking place. The segment featured an interview with Patricia Pulling, a woman who claimed that her son had committed suicide after becoming obsessed with D&D. Pulling argued that the game was responsible for her son's death and claimed that it was being used by satanic cults. The 60 Minutes segment on D&D was widely watched and had a significant impact on public perception of the game. It helped to fuel the belief that D&D was linked to Satanism and other forms of occult activity, and contributed to the fear and paranoia surrounding the game and its players. However, the segment was criticized for its lack of balance and for relying on anecdotal evidence rather than hard facts. Many people, including experts on role-playing games and mental health professionals, argued that there was no evidence to support the claim that D&D was responsible for Pulling's son's suicide or that it was being used by satanic cults. Despite this, the segment had a lasting impact on the reputation of D&D and the role-playing game industry. Despite these sensationalized assertions, research has not found any evidence linking Dungeons & Dragons to any real-world violence or criminal activity. In fact, many researchers believe the game is actually beneficial for children's mental health by encouraging creativity and problem-solving skills through imaginative play. The media coverage of the Satanic Panic caused widespread concern amongst parents about the game, leading to D&D being banned from many schools and libraries. The ban not only prohibited students from playing D&D in school premises, but also barred them from having access to books and other materials related to the game. This created a sense of fear among parents that their children would be exposed to material that could influence their behavior in an unfavorable way. As a result, some stores stopped selling Dungeons & Dragons products altogether. Although this was eventually overturned when it became clear that there was no evidence linking D&D with satanic practices or any other undesirable activity, it took years for public opinion on the matter to change significantly. However, sales of the game increased. Teenagers in particular found the idea of playing a forbidden game enticing. A Dungeons & Dragons cartoon was launched on network TV. A video game was licensed. D&D became a big part of popular culture. TSR was the company that invented D&D and owned it at the time. It had been having money problems before the Satanic Panic targeted the D&D game. The notoriety of being featured on 60 Minutes and being the subject of countless cautionary sermons assured the survival of D&D and allowed it to become the major cultural influence it is today. This video has provided information on the Satanic Panic that arose in relation to Dungeons & Dragons and its impact on gamers during the 1980s. Despite the negative press surrounding D&D during this period, it has enjoyed a resurgence in recent years as more people have become interested in tabletop gaming again. As such, it is important to remember that false accusations do not always lead to lasting consequences and that people can still find enjoyment in something that was once deemed taboo. In fact, Dungeons & Dragons may be as popular as it is now because of the 1980s Satanic Panic scare.